Well, when we're looking at a field on our farm that's got corn stalks, most likely that's going to go to soybeans the next year. So we're thinking about picking soybean varieties as we're out in this field today.
Yep, so we wanted to talk about some of the things we look at on our own farm. Now, the first thing that I will tell you is you want to buy soybeans early in the year, because the longer you wait, the better chance you have to pay a higher price, to get soybean varieties you don't necessarily want, and to get the lower quality seed. Because the way all seed companies work is they have what they call lots of seeds. So not by lot, not the word lots. I mean not mini.
I know what you mean. They have different fields, and they call that one lot of soybeans, and they may have 50 different lots of that same variety. But the way they choose which ones are going to come in and get processed first is they say, you know, let's take the one that's 99% germ first. Yep. Then we'll take the one that's 98. And pretty soon they get towards the end of the year, and if they're quote unquote sold out, they may have got down to the 90%. Then if they really want to and they're really desperate and a lot more acres are going to soybeans, they'll pull out the 85% germ lot. So if you're ordering early, you've got a good chance. If you're going to take that soybean seed fairly early, you're going to get the best germination percentage there was for that particular variety.
Now, the thing is, you're probably saying, well, I'm going to treat my soybeans and I want my dealer to treat those beans. You know what? It's not necessarily that you take the beans so early, because chances are if your seed dealer gets that seed in early, he's going to sit there with it for several months and it will be the good stuff. So it's just that a lot of the seed dealers, they don't want to take risks, because these soybeans are going to cost roughly $40 a unit, and the seed dealer doesn't want to sit on a bunch of beans that he may or may not sell. So once you order it from the seed dealer, then he'll bring it in from the company, but you want to tell your seed dealer, hey, I want the best germinating stuff and the best varieties, so let's order it early, let's bring it in early, and then I'll just take it from you at planting time.
Well, here's the other thing. Right now, there's so much change in the soybean industry in the United States. It's crazy. Liberty Link soybeans are blowing up. They're getting a lot more acres, so those varieties are new, and in many cases, the newest varieties, there's fairly limited supply. In the Roundup Ready soybeans, Roundup Ready to Yield soybeans really took the country by storm this year. The yield was substantially better in many cases than the Roundup Ready 1 counterparts. So a lot of farmers, and you're probably one of them, want to switch to those Roundup Ready to Yield soybeans. Well, guess what? Many of them were first-year varieties, so they're going to have a pretty good supply, but there may be limited supply on certain varieties. So you want to make sure that you're getting the numbers that you want to get. That's another reason that you definitely want to order early. Now look, order from a dealer where you can make changes later on. Maybe you decide, you know what, I'm not going to have quite so many soybean acres, I need to cut back a little bit. That's fine with most dealers. Just talk to them up front about this. Hey, I want to place an order early, but just in case I need to change some acres around, can I change it later? And if they're fine with that, that's the place to be.
Well, it's great to get the varieties you want, have good germinating seed, but you know, honestly, I figure that stuff is usually going to be okay anyway. I mean, you still want to do it, but I'm just saying, for me, the number one reason why I'm ordering early is so we can prepay early. Because when you look at the prepay discounts, they're tremendous. You're going to get over 12% APR, in some cases 18% APR, by paying early. So even if you have to go borrow the money for 5 or 6%, you made great money on the money, and that's a good way to overall increase net income on your farm.
But when you're looking at soybean varieties, let's just get right down to the nuts and bolts of this thing. Prepaying, getting the right price, getting the best variety, the best germination percentage, that is all important. But you know what? We do test plots with soybeans every year, and there'll be a 10 bushel difference between one variety and another variety in the same field. Now granted, there'll probably be 2 or 3 that are fairly close to the top, but then there'll be this 1 or 2 varieties that places at the bottom. That's what you don't want to have. You want to have something that places towards the top. The way you do this is you look at a number of different trials, whether it's on your farm or in your local area, and see what happened in those trials. If you've got a number that, hey, it won this plot, but it finished dead last in the other, you don't want that. It's got some issue with that variety, whether it's a disease tolerance or just doesn't have top-end yield, something. So you really have to know your ground and then pick varieties that are going to be consistent performers. We all like to pick that one racehorse number that wins all the time, but let's face it, our whole farm is not a perfect garden. We've got some spots out there that have high soil pH or have soybean cyst nematodes or maybe have some Phytophthora issues. I don't know what the problem is on your farm, but there's some issue out there. You need to pick a variety that's got some defense, but also has some good top-end yield, so you have consistent performance on your farm.
Well, yeah, but here's where I'm going to disagree with you, Darren, because
There's a surprise.
Well,
it wouldn't be an Ag PhD show if we got along.
Yeah, but the thing is, every variety out there at some point or another is going to finish on the bottom, and it's probably also going to finish at the top.
I don't agree.
So my strategy and what we do on our own farm is spread our risk. So if we've got, let's say, 1,300, 1,200 acres of soybeans for next year in 2011, which I think is what we're going to have roughly, we'll probably plant 6, 8 different varieties.
Yeah, we'll have a bunch of different numbers. That's right.
Right, and we also will spread the maturity a little bit. Now, understand this, whether it's corn or soybeans, as a general statement, the later maturities are going to beat the earlier maturities. In a normal year or a year that you have a late frosted fall.
A normal year. This is funny. You know, the last 2 years, we had one of the coldest years on record, and then we had a fantastically warm year this year, so we had 2 completely different years.
And last year the early varieties were better, this year the later varieties are better.
That's kind of spread that risk
That's
out.
right, and that's where I'm going. So to say that the later numbers are better, sure, if you know you're going to have a full season, but do you know that? No, you don't. So on our farm, for example, we planted as early as a 1.3 maturity and as late as a 2.5 maturity. Now, you probably don't need to spread it out that much. If your normal's a 2.0, I'd say be in the 1.7 to 2.3 kind of range, something like that.
Well, that's a fine range. But the other thing is, I thought you were going to talk about planting date, because we did get an early start on our farm this year.
Not that early.
Well, with corn especially, we got early, and so that led to some guys in our area got beans in the latter part of April and that first week of May. And there was more sudden death syndrome this year than we've seen ever before, especially in Iowa and southern Minnesota, and it seemed to almost exclusively lie in those fields that got in early. So by spreading out your maturity risk a little bit, you don't have to worry about, man, I got to get everything in as early as I possibly can. There's still great yield potential dropping down a half a maturity group from where you normally plant. If you plant that 2.0, drop back to a 1.5 on some of that later stuff that you plant, it may be your best beans depending on the year.
Yep, and I will tell you this too, even this year where I said the late maturities did better, you know what, the very early planting we did that first week of May, it was no better than what we did the middle of May. In fact, the very best stuff we had was around the 15th of May, and we're in southeast South Dakota. You know, I know a lot of guys were out there planting their beans in April. I wouldn't have a problem doing a few acres of that, but I'm sure not going to do everything. So this is the whole message that we're trying to get to you. Spread your risk out. Don't just plant 1 or 2 soybean varieties on your farm. Again, I'm going to disagree with Darren on, you know, this top bottom consistency thing. We don't know what consistency is, because every variety you're going to plant is probably 2 years old or less. So we don't have enough data to say it's consistent or not consistent. That's why you have to spread your risk out.
Well, obviously, Brian isn't the guy that likes to look through lots of data on our farm, and that's fine. You don't have to be that kind of guy.
But by the time I figure it out, then I can't even buy that soybean variety anymore.
You just need to play the odds on your farm. You need to buy your seed early because you're going to get the best deal. You need to take your seed or have your seed dealer take that seed as early as possible. You'll get the best germination, and then spread your risk out with a number of different varieties over a number of different maturity dates. That way you know year in and year out you're going to consistently be good. You're going to consistently be in the top third, or at least at worst, I should say, the top half of the farmers in your area, yeah. And chances are you're going to be the winner.
And the one thing I like that you did say is you got to know what you have for problems on your farm, whether it's SCN or Phytophthora, those kinds of things. But I'll tell you this, if you can fix your ground, then you don't have to worry so much about which soybean varieties you pick. So for example, if you have poor drainage on your farms, that's led to high soil pH. Well,
like this farm right here that we're on.
Yeah. So we put some tile in, it's fixing the high pH areas, and it's also lowering salt levels in those areas. So now instead of only being able to pick a few very good iron deficiency chlorosis beans, now we can pick from anything. So we've got a lot better chance to get high yield.
There are a lot of things that go into picking the right soybean variety, but also a number of things that go into getting great weed control on your farm. Can you identify this week's weed of the week?